Hi, I'm Tom Burgess, and thank you for listening to the Weekly Wake Up, where we set off the alarm on what's really happening in our country. Now, today, we're going to be talking about abolishing billionaires. And we're also going to be talking about how the Bank of Mum and Dad is now Britain's 10th largest mortgage lender, and how Boris thinks Britain can easily cope with a no-deal Brexit, but forgets the 9 million low-income renters and indeed the homeless who struggle every day with no sign of any help to fix these basic insecurities. So let me first introduce the team that we have here in the studio today. Welcome back, Satya. What would you like to talk about?
Oh, well, Tom, I am going to talk about abolishing billionaires today. You know, it's a very provocative title, as you can see. There was an article that came out in the New York Times. So we're going to talk about that later.
Okay. You very kindly bought the biscuits. Tell us what we've got this week. They've been very nice to keep us from our hunger at bay.
This week we have gluten-free biscuits, and they are rich quadruple chocolate cookies.
Well, they were very nice, and they really set us up for the show. And also we've got Hugh, our man from Brussels, soon to be our man from Balham, who has not been here for the last 2 weeks. So welcome back, Hugh. I believe there's a new job on the way.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, new job. Very exciting. Can't wait to start.
When do you start then?
Next Monday.
Well, good luck with that. And also, there was another special day yesterday. What was that, Hugh?
It was my birthday.
Oh,
happy birthday.
Thank you, guys.
Again. 21 again.
Sorry I didn't bring any cake.
No, there's no cake. Well, we got the biscuits.
We'll put a candle on the biscuits.
Are you ready?
I'm definitely not having any of those biscuits.
No, I think we'll skip that. But we'll have the biscuits and water this week. And Oliver is on holiday, who's normally here, and also Leah once again has got conference calls with her New York office, so those two are not able to be with us, but nevertheless there's three of us here in the studio. This week the two studio cats, Gary and Brian, are not in the studio. They're busy having their dinner. Hugh forgot to have lunch today, so he had to nip to the chip shop to top up his carbs before we got started, but I think you're quite full now, are you?
I'm absolutely full to the brim.
You're raring to go, and you did give me a bit of a chip butty, which is really nice. Just before we get on with our chat today on the Weekly Wake Up, I just wanted to tell you about the Big Tent Events Festival that we also mentioned last week. That's coming up this Saturday on the 31st, and it's at Mudshoot Park and Farm in Tower Hamlets, London. The Big Tent Ideas Festival brings together people from all backgrounds and political affiliations for a day of political and cultural debate. You can find out more at bigtent.org.uk. So you come in, Satya?
I'm hoping to.
And we're always looking for new people on the team, whether to help with content, production or marketing. So do contact us if you would like to get involved. And also let us know what you think. Email us at info@realagenda.org because we love to hear your comments. And each week, the Weekly Wake Up consists of 2 to 4 panelists, and each chooses a topic and related to a recent event or media story connected with the fundamental issues of reducing inequality, resolving poverty, and bringing greater social and economic justice, because that's, as we see it, is the real agenda. And this is discussed with a view as to what we can be done to resolve these issues and what we, the people, can do about it. So first up, Satya, let's get on with our chat today. You all ready, Hugh?
Yeah.
Hugh's busy taking notes because he's just getting all his research work done and his fact checker. So that's very good. Okay.
Yes, so we're going to talk about this article called Abolishing Billionaires, and it's by, it's a letter from Max Lawson, who is head of policy at Oxfam. And he raises a couple of really interesting questions. What if, instead of being a sign of economic success, billionaires are a sign of economic failure? In what ways can the boom in billionaires and the dramatic increase in extreme wealth that we have generally, how can it be good or harmful for our society and our economy?
Well, that's it. It isn't really, is it? The article goes on to say that approximately 1/3 of billionaire wealth comes from inheritance, and another third apparently from what's been described as crony connections to government and monopoly.
Yeah.
So it's where the money comes from, and also what is the point of billionaires? It's all being accumulated, and once it's accumulated by billionaires, it's getting inherited, passed down,
stays within the family. And the other thing is that money creates more money, so that only the wealthy then begin to get more and more richer, while the rest of us stay where we are. Now, in this country, we have 151 billionaires, and given that a billion is 1,000 million. And to put it in another context, if you were to count a million, it'll take you 12 days. But if you were to count 1 billion, it will take you 31 years. That's the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire. What do these people do with all this money?
It's an enormous amount of money, isn't it? I mean, 1,000 million. I'd be happy with 1 million. You know, it's ludicrous.
The fact is, once you have the money, it's easier to get more money. They can afford to have the advisors. And I think it said here that they were making 11% return on the money that they had, whereas the rest of us is never so good because they've got advisors too.
Actually, we're now paying banks to keep our money. We get no interest whatsoever at all. So our money isn't working. We're just, most of us are static. We have to work every day. Somebody could sit there and watch their money just grow, couldn't they? These billionaires. That's why we have such inequality in the country between the people who have a lot of money and the people who have very little, because the money just stays with those people. Well, and they also refuse to pay taxes. They don't pay enough tax.
It's out of circulation. That's the thing when we're talking about this with accumulated wealth. It's out of circulation. So, you know, it's like if you give £1,000 to somebody has no money, they'll spend it. If you give £1,000 to someone who's got lots of money, they'll save it. That's why this connection, because some people will say to us, well, what does it matter if there's billionaires and millionaires and super wealthy people? Well, it does matter, because all the funds that we create together is accumulated by a few. And therefore, if it wasn't accumulated by a few, it doesn't mean to say you can't accumulate money, but it was spread more evenly, people would be better off. There is actually enough wealth to go around the whole world that actually would make everybody have a reasonable standard of living, but it's just accumulated.
So what you're saying, Tom, is that the wealth is created by the many, but is accumulated by the few.
That's our system, and that's what needs changing. Therefore, that's the case for not, punishing taxes on wealth because you're wealthy. No, it's because we've all created the wealth, and more of it needs to be put back into the community so we can all benefit.
I think one thing to remember as well is that we're talking about these people with vast amounts of money. However, all this money, in the majority of times, is invested as well. So that's how they make their 11%, is because it's invested, and they probably can't touch that money at all. So that money being invested will be invested in companies that are going to bring back a certain amount of profit. It's not as if they had a bank account with 1,000 million pounds in it. That money is in circulation to some degree. I think the problem is that off the back of that, they're not paying any taxes at all. And it was estimated that they should be paying 30% more taxes on their actual wealth. That's where the real problem is.
There's tax avoidance, but you talk about the money being invested, and I hear what you're saying, because you said, well, this money must be somewhere. But a lot of it is not in circulation. Okay, we get the outward signs of conspicuous consumption. They've got yachts and many houses and all this sort of thing. But it's where that money is spent, because they're controlling how that money is spent, where we, the community, and the rest of us have no control over it. Even if it's philanthropy. It's good if wealthy people are philanthropic, but they're controlling the agenda as well. So we're not saying it's a bad thing. It's just that we don't have a say.
Sometimes it's good that people with a bit of financial acumen, a bit of, that know what to do with money, control it a little bit. Sometimes there's a lot of waste as well when you give a lot of money to people that don't know what to do with it, perhaps.
Really shocked me in the article is the bit where he talks about cronyism, or people who have a lot of money actually can work around governments, and they can actually get big contracts with governments at very, very, very valuable rates. And so it's almost talks about how the government could be colluding with these people. They're the ones who actually get those contracts and make more money. And I find that quite shocking, Tom.
Like who you know and who you meet at parties, where princes rub shoulders with financiers and get up to no end of bad things. There's this sort of
Where are we going here, Tom?
I'm not going to even go there.
We're not going to go there.
I'm not talking about, but I'm just talking generally. There's this. Also, the Oxfam report does, talking about how we resolve these things. Actually, they've got a new paper out called The 7 Deadly Sins, which came out in time for the G7 summit, but talks about wealth taxes and how important this is and how this the contributes. So in terms of how we answer this thing with billionaires, because actually billionaires do not have any added value in many ways to society, and they need to put more back into the community, and that's one way of being able to make that happen. Because you don't make the wealth. You don't make the wealth without the infrastructure, without the education, without the health.
So, in terms of the question that Max Lawson poses, are billionaires good for our economy, or is that a sign of a successful economy, or is it a sign of a failing economy? I think we probably think that actually it's is a failing economy
because it's too much tipping at one end.
Yeah,
and that's just not a good thing, because at the other end, people with huge insecurities.
Brings us nicely, actually, to an article by the Institute of Public Policy Research. 10 points that actually they think would make Britain a much better place.
This is the Economic Justice Commission that was announced last year, wasn't it?
Yes.
Prosperity and justice.
So they talk about things like reshaping the economy. Commission proposes that we have a better industrial strategy with clear goals and criteria to support industry, to create better and more independent industry. But they also talk about helping unions and having more, the unions reviving the unions. You remember Thatcher basically killed the unions in this country, or they became very, very weak. Some companies that I know of, which won't be mentioned, actually would close down industries and businesses in this country, because rather than somewhere else in Europe, say Germany or France, because the unions are much stronger in those countries. And it's easier, they only do it because it's so much easier to do it in this country, because the unions have very little power.
And indeed, also just looking at those 10 points, the other one was tackling wealth inequality, with wealth taxes was also mentioned there. And so the Economic Justice Commission, which I went to the launch last year, it was very thorough. It's more or less a manifesto for government. So let's hope some of those things might get implemented with the next government.
One of the points that kind of came up to me here was improving the private sector. The report calls for company directors to be given duties that go wider than just addressing the interests of shareholders. The Commission believes that investors extract more cash from UK businesses than they put in through dividends and share buyback programs, which holds back investment and improvement in productivity throughout. I mean, that point in itself, the fact that you're extracting more money than you put in, there's something wrong there.
Well, that also touches on the discussions the new series that we're doing, Profit for Purpose, on the Real Agenda, which is we've just done the first episode where we featured the Executive Director, Chris Turner, of the B Corporations, and that's exactly what that's about, the triple bottom line. It's not just the shareholder, and they ask companies to change their governance so that it doesn't just talk just about the shareholders, there's also the social and environmental considerations
and
as a way of measuring success.
Yeah, and it's the inclusion of workers on company boards as well, and remuneration committees.
Kind of calls for more transparency, isn't it, really, in terms of who's getting paid what for what they do.
I think I read it was an article in City AM a couple of weeks ago saying that the average pay of CEOs on the FTSE 100 boards has gone down quite a bit again, which is good. CEOs earning ridiculous amounts of money compared to their workers. It's just
and that's
not fair,
happened because of a lot of pressure. They did it after a lot of pressure was forced on them. But actually, if you still look, Tom, we were talking about this last week, weren't we? The difference between the average wage earners and the top wage earners is still huge. Great gap still.
The pressure though comes from the investors. That's the funny thing. So it's the investors that are rising up against the pay of CEOs.
And that's a good thing. And there's organisations like Share Action, and so we've also interviewed here on the Real Agenda, in episode 4, I think. And that's sort of what they're doing, taking public company boards to account on a load of issues. And move on to Bank of Mum and Dad.
Bank of Mum and Dad. I wanted to have a quick chat about this because it's something that actually came out on my birthday, believe it or not.
Ooh, Happy birthday.
We've already mentioned your birthday. We don't need to mention it again. You're not going to get cards emailed in.
The article here is about parents who spend so much money on their children to help them getting on the housing ladder. Parents are now amongst the biggest lenders in the UK, according to a survey from Legal & General. So the average parental contribution for home buyers this year is £24,100. That's from parents, and that is up by more than £6,000 compared to last year, which is mental, isn't it? Where's that money coming from? You know, that's money that is in their pockets. And the rest of the article is obviously about, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing that parents are actually having to help their kids this way? Because it just means that money is going from the parents' pocket into their kids' pocket. What are these? I mean, my mother retired from work last month. I would hate to think that I'm going to be taking any money from her retirement fund.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because she's worked all her life for this. She's worked very hard to have the money that she has now. You know, it's just not fair on the parents.
The total amount collectively given 6.3 billion, and the number 10 mortgage lender in the UK was Clydesdale Bank at 5 billion.
Yeah.
So if if mum and dad were collectively a mortgage lender, they'd come in at number 10 of the largest lenders. At the top the top is Lloyd's Banking Group at 42.5 billion, and the Bank of Mum and Dad at 6.3 billion. So that's pretty significant. Oh, it's great for the children if their parents can do that. It's difficult to say, well, don't do it, because if you're in a position to do it, well, okay. But it does mean that it's the unfair advantage and social mobility issues are continued to the next generation, and we've got loads of people who can get nowhere near buying a house or even renting one because of the crazy cost of housing. So don't get me started on that one.
The other important point, I think, of this article, because it really is about two things, isn't it? It's about how much money parents are giving towards their mortgage, but it's about how badly this is affecting parents who are giving the money away to their kids. It was about 1/4 of those surveyed weren't confident that they had enough money to last throughout their retirement. I mean, a quarter of the people giving money to their kids are now worried about it. 15% said they already accepted a lower standard of living due to helping out their kids.
It raises a hell of a lot of questions. So
why do you have kids?
Why do you have kids is one of them, yeah. Why would you?
Why would you?
It's a lovely thing.
Yeah.
As you will find out sometime soon, Hugh. Satir and I can speak from experience.
Yes, it is a lovely thing. Most of the time.
Most of the time.
But actually, it strikes me that only people who have the money can actually help their children.
Yeah.
What about all those people who actually don't have the money to help
that's
their
the whole
children?
point, yeah.
What happens to those young people
They're
who
disadvantaged.
cannot
Well,
and will not ever be able to afford their own homes?
Well, those young people are going to have to pay for their parents' retirement as well. Money for people retiring just isn't there either. So it's an extra burden on these
Perhaps
people.
we should get really depressed on this show.
Actually, hang on a minute. The IPPR, that the commission that we were just talking about, one of the other things recommendations they've made is about tackling wealth inequality. The recommendation that they're given to the government is that they should have something called the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and they should do it with the sale of the Royal Bank of Scotland shares, and which are worth about 186 billion, or will be worth about 186 billion in the next 10 years. And they said they should use the proceeds from that to give all 25-year-olds a lump sum of £10,000 to get them started. Maybe, it would be getting rid of some of their debts, especially student debts.
You can't just give people money, lump sums of money, though, can you?
Well, you can, but
Why not?
it could be in some sort of fund that could only be used for certain things. It's like the idea of an education fund for people. You get a 10,000 or 20,000 education allowance. The same thing, it could only be spent on property or things, but it's nevertheless an idea that could be considered.
It's an idea. I mean, how many young people leave university with huge debts on their heads, and then they're struggling for years and years, so they're trying to get rid of their debts? How in the hell are they then going to be able to afford a house in any case, or even to rent a decent place? So something has to be done somewhere.
The other unintended consequences of that, and it's talking about student debt, is it actually pushes down demand because they've got to pay out so much out of their salary for student debt. Some people may say, well, it's not that much. It still reduces the chances of that 200 that they might be paying out a month or 100. They could be putting that down on a mortgage or whatever it is. That's the other thing. There's loads of unintended consequences of some of these austerity actions that the government's taken over recent years.
I mean, the other issue, I suppose, with that is, as you're saying, Hugh, is if parents are helping their children buy these homes and then they're finding they don't have enough money for their old age, who's going to have to look after them in their old age?
Well, the kids.
Is it the government? Is it the taxpayer? Who's going to do social care?
Exactly. That's the big problem, isn't it? I was in a cab. We got chatting, and the driver said he ended up saying that he had 5 kids. I was like, wow, 5 kids. That's enormous.
Yeah, beware, Hugh.
He said, yeah,
it's 4 too many.
He said, yeah, two of them are now off to uni this year, which is brilliant. Still got 3 at home. And he said, it's absolutely fantastic. I loved having kids. It has been very, very difficult financially. However, he says, I'm going to have a fantastic retirement. Which, what a great way of looking at it. And that is social security right there, is that if you have a problem, you've got 5 backups. You're retiring, you've got 5 people.
So is that going to be your policy?
Yeah, if the kids decide to look after their parents.
Yeah, yes.
And if they don't move to Australia.
Yes.
Who knows? Anything could happen.
Yeah.
Time is running away with us, as it does. And I just wanted to briefly talk about an article that came out on Monday the 26th. Boris Johnson said Britain could easily cope with a no-deal Brexit, which would be the fault of the European Union leaders. Obduracy. Or what's obduracy?
Only he could use a word like that, actually.
At the G7 summit. And so, therefore, that's it's all very well to say they could easily cope. And actually, I wanted to just make a comment. He came from the Reverend Paul Nicholson at Taxpayers Against Poverty. And so I'm going to plagiarise what he said here. He said it's all very well for the Prime Minister who tells us that Britain can easily cope with a no-deal Brexit. That may be true for landowners and landlords, but it's for the low-income renters with rising rents. It's very different. There's 4 million social and 4.7 million in private housing of low-income levels who are already not easily coping owing to the inbuilt and deepening inequality of the UK housing market. The Prime Minister can say one thing about it's okay. You look at the people, ordinary people of this country, it's very difficult. So these renters are households that are already at risk from hunger, and the injustice of which is drowned by the Brexit headlines, and we don't hear enough about it. This is the real agenda as we see it. And the UK is the only country in the world that makes tenants pay the landlord's property tax. For example, a landlord in Tottenham who bought to let a 2-bedroomed terraced house for $95,000 in 1999. All the houses on the same side of the street were new at the time. An identical property next door is now on the market for $425,000.
Wow.
So a low-income tenant gets none of that £330,000 increase in the landlord's wealth. So therefore it's very easy to cope with Brexit in that situation. The council tax based on the 1991 valuation of UK properties, and it's well out of date. So that's the crazy situation. People,
it's crazy. First of all, I'd like to take issue with that word that Boris used. Obscurity?
You worked out what it is. You've got your dictionary in front of you. What does it mean then?
We haven't been able to work out what it means.
Obscurity.
I mean, the thing is he a man of the people or not?
No.
Why would you use words like that?
He's a Latin scholar as far as I can work out. A clown.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous in my book. We can't even find it
on
Google.
Sorry, what's the word?
You're looking at what it says here, obduracy, Obduracy.
Obdurate is a formal word meaning stubborn. If you want the major in English, but your parents are obdurate, that you should go.
It's very easy for certain people. Oh, we can cope.
Yeah.
You've got the financial backing, you've got the security, that's fine. There are millions of people every day who've got financial insecurity and they're left behind and there's been very little mention of it.
I mean, it brings us right back to the beginning of all of this, because many of the people who voted for Brexit were people who are not going to be able to cope with it. We know that because of where the votes came from and how many of the areas that those votes came from are where people are living on low incomes, where people are not wealthy, where people have lower levels of education, lower levels of work opportunities and training opportunities. We know why they did it, because they feel so disenfranchised by all of the political system. But actually, they are the ones who are going to suffer the most out of this.
Indeed they are. We'd like to talk about answers, so just a quick one on this particular issue with low-income renters. If we change the council tax system, that it only applied to landlords because that's where the wealth is accumulated, and if we adjusted the council tax bands where higher value properties were paying a lot more, we would be able to release a lot of people at the lower end from paying these figures and reducing their rents. So that would make a significant difference to people. Ultimately, we switch to a land value tax. We have to do it in stages.
How do you do that, though, for families that have just bought a place and all of a sudden their council tax triples or doubles?
I don't think that would be the case. I think once it's being talked about, people will be aware of that, and it's just something we have to face up to.
You'd have a gradual...
Yes, you probably would. You'd spin it in over a few years. But the council tax system needs a complete review. But the whole thing is these low-income renters are still being asked to pay council tax. They can't even afford the rent, and the rents are going up because the land is so expensive. There are answers to that, and they need to be implemented. Have you anything else to add in on this?
I was just going to say it's greed, isn't it?
It is greed.
It's pure greed.
But there are answers.
One more thing that the Commission has said on them, they're thinking that devolution actually would really help, particularly in the different areas, in the different regions. So if we were to rezone everything and actually spread our wealth more equally between those zones and fund each area properly, then it would go a long way in terms of actually trying to tackle that inequality across the country.
It could indeed, and we'd be more highly focused on the areas that need changing and injecting things.
I really don't like to admit here, but the fact that Boris is pushing his fibre broadband everywhere is not a bad thing, is it?
I agree with you that it can only be a good thing, and we need to focus on it and we need to do it. All agreed. But actually, there are some real fundamental things that he needs to be talking about also. I've not heard him talk about inequality. No. I've not heard him talk about poverty. I've not heard him talk about everything else that's going on. That's the real agenda.
That's what we're talking about. Anyway, that's the show for this week. We hope we've woken you up, and that we were all awake here, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
And well, no, you were a bit sleepy earlier.
I was a bit.
You had a
but
few
actually,
late nights.
I love these issues, and it's woken me up.
Oh,
and
good.
You guys
okay, well, you've woken
brilliant.
up. Let's hope the audience has woken up, that we've woken you up, and that we have helped inform, inspire you, and that you'll want to get involved to make change happen. You can email us at info@realagenda.org or contact us via our website, realagenda.org. So what's coming up on the Real Agenda next? Coming soon, our new series, which we've already started, Profit for Purpose. We will be talking to Julian Richer, the founder of Richer Sounds. And of course, the weekly Wake Up will be back next Friday. So we look forward to talking to you again. A special thanks to our sponsors, Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies. Find out why at reversemediagroup.com. So one thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as a more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for the people over party. It's urgent, and it's up to us to make it happen. That's the Real Agenda, and I'm Tom Burgess, and it's goodbye from... Saty's laughing.
Goodbye from me.
And...
goodbye from me.
That's Hugh. Okay, thank you very much indeed for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.